So what have you reviewed that correlates with the risk factors for IPV that related to Mr. Depp?
So risk factor I reviewed that correlate. So starting with I guess we'll start with the physical because that was the question that was put out there. What I have reviewed has demonstrated pushing, shoving, grabbing.
Objection, Your Honor.
Let me see if I can direct this a little differently, Dr. Spiegel. Rather than giving the summary of what that was, what did you review that correlates? In other words, did you review witness statements? Did you review depositions, photos?
Yes. So what I reviewed was in terms of witness statements, Dr. Kipper's notes. Very, very interestingly, actually, early on in I think it was 2012, or around that time, circa 2012, 2014, Ms. Heard was...
Action beyond the scope of the question.
What he reviewed is the question.
All right, let's see.
So I reviewed so Ms. Heard's...
Objection, there's no question pending.
If he's answering, go ahead and answer what you reviewed. Please continue with what you reviewed.
Therapist's notes, counselor's notes, text messages, depositions, video, pictures, psychologists' notes and evaluations, and I said physicians' notes. That's what I reviewed.
All right. Now, you've indicated that intimate partner violence includes physical violence, sexual abuse, and psychological aggression. Can you please describe for the jury what psychological aggression is and what it entails?
So, it says psychological aggression would be the engaging in behavior for the sole purpose of emotionally and or mentally harming someone, with the main purpose of, again, to maintain control. So behaviors that can occur with psychological aggression include insults, intimidation, holding things financially against someone, jealousy rants, property destruction. So all that is involved, a nonverbal communication, so threatening looks, glances, things like that. All that is involved in psychological maltreatment and intimate partner violence.
What if anything would be psychological aggression if it was trying to control somebody's career? Would that be a factor?
Yes.
Action leading.
Overruled.
So yeah, I'm trying to control someone's career. That would be under financial, trying to mistreat someone, especially someone wants to succeed and try and have a career, and you're preventing them from doing so by maltreatment. That's another example.
Okay. So I'm going to ask specifically about the risk factors for intimate partner violence. Is substance abuse a risk factor for intimate partner violence?
Yes, it is a risk factor as well as a precipitating cause.
Okay. And what record evidence did you review that correlates to Mr. Depp engaging in substance abuse?
So the record evidence of, I'll just start with Dr. Kipper and the substances that Mr. Depp was using and misusing, both in terms of prescribed and on your drug screen, were brought out through that.
Okay. Is lack of behavioral control and impulsiveness risk factors for intimate partner violence?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And what, if any, record evidence were you aware of that Mr. Depp exhibited lack of behavioral control and impulsiveness?
Again, threatening.
Objection. Record evidence.
That correlates with, and I'm on the risk factors at this
overruled.
point. Thank you, Your Honor.
Threatening, destroying furniture, property, breaking things, writings on walls, mirrors, writing in blood on furniture. All that would go with that.
Okay. All right. And what, if any, risk factor is narcissism for intimate partner violence?
So a patient, before we get into narcissistic personality traits or disorder, the overall, it's categorized under what's called cluster B personality
Objection,
disorder.
Your Honor, beyond the scope of the question.
He's explaining the narcissism.
Well, I'll sustain objection if you
Okay.
ask a question.
Can you explain to the jury what's involved with narcissism as it relates to the risk factors of intimate partner violence and
So
what that realm is?
So narcissism patients have, again, poor self-control, okay, rapid mood shifts, okay. As a result, they have an undue sense of admiration. They worship power, they worship control. They have lack of empathy, and people are generally kept around as long as they're useful to them. A large sense of entitlement. Anything else? Need for praise. So that would go under narcissistic personality and IPV.
What, if any, what, if any, traits would be requiring admiration? Would that fit into it?
Yeah, oh yes, requiring admiration, need to be admired is part and parcel of narcissistic personality disorder. Yes.
Would being envious fit within that?
Yes.
Fragile self-esteem?
Yes.
And what, if any, record evidence do you have that correlates with Mr. Depp being narcissistic?
Well, I do think that the fact that he thought that Amber owed him, Ms. Heard owed him.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The fact that Ms. Heard owed him and only wanted to be together with him because of his fame is an example of that. I do think the jealousy aspects are an example of that. I do think, as I think Mr. Tillett had testified that, being admired is one thing, but then behind your back saying something else about people is another thing. And I can probably say with a reasonable certainty that to some degree this whole trial is that.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
That's not record evidence.
Overruled.
Speculation.
Overruled.
Please continue.
That this whole trial, in terms of narcissistic insult, is what's going on. I believe that Mr. Depp was very much a mainstay appropriately in Hollywood, and then this was pulled the rug without.
Objection, Your Honor. Can we be?
He's able to explain what
I'll
he's.
sustain that objection.
Can you explain what you mean by this whole trial?
Your
This
Honor, can we
proceeding would go,
approach?
Yes.
this court
Yeah,
case
there's-
we're going through, right?
There's an objection, sir.
What other conduct is in the record evidence that correlates with Mr. Depp being narcissistic, having those traits?
Was the thing about the trial rule? I can't
Yeah,
speak.
Your
you're
Honor.
not allowed to say that.
Not say that. Okay.
Okay.
The only other thing about narcissism that I think in terms of the trial would be in order to maintain any sense of control, a narcissistic person really has to have lack of empathy, because in order to engage in behaviors that quote unquote are used to keep individuals in control, you don't really think about the other person. You're not really caring what happens to that other person. So I think that's another facet.
So, are attitudes accepting or justifying intimate partner violence a risk factor for intimate partner violence?
Yes.
Do some perpetrators in intimate partner violence try to minimize the IPV?
Yes. So it is unfortunately not uncommon, especially during the calm phases of the abuse cycle where there is no increased tension, there is no acting out. Okay, you are talking about more of the honeymoon, apologetic phase, begging for forgiveness, telling them how you're going to change, maybe giving them gifts. And then when the dust settles later in the day, a day or two later, it is not uncommon for the perpetrator to kind of switch the blame over to the victim, saying that, hey, this either denial, this never actually happened and trying to make me look bad, or an allopathic defense where you instigated it, or an altruistic effect where I'm doing it for you, transformative effect, that society kind of accepts this. So it is very uncommon for all of a sudden for that to start shifting during that time, because it is during the calm phase and everything is relatively calm. This, of course, is when the victim wants to engage in treatment. But beyond that, the ability to kind of quote unquote, for lack of a better phrase, win people over, family, friends, the law. I mean, the very ability to do that is part and parcel of that calm, charming phase where it looks like the victim is, just fabricating this.
And is victim blaming a characteristic?
Yes, like I said, to blame the victim, that one of the defenses are the allopathic defense comes along with victim blaming. That's what essentially you're doing. I'm blaming you for what you made me do.
Okay. And is there record evidence that you reviewed that correlates with Mr. Depp engaging in this type of behavior?
So I think for a lot of the issues seen, the big precipitant was going to be the need for sobriety. Coming back to that severe
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
I think he's trying to explain it. Thank you. Please continue.
There's severe substance use disorder, and many of their arguments, but what I reviewed in the record, stemmed around Ms. Heard's desire for Mr. Depp to maintain sobriety, and that what was happened. So as a result, she was blamed for, bothering him in a way he didn't want to be bothered, and that triggered what was going on.
Are you familiar with the term gaslighting?
I'm familiar with the term gaslighting.
Okay. What, if any, gaslighting is consistent with intimate partner violence and the risk factors?
So again, when you start being able to be, when a person starts to be able to be manipulative and charming, you start to be able to win people over. And especially when you see someone who's a victim who is essentially vulnerable, emotionally labile, okay? You see that person, and then you see this calm demeanor in front of you who's very charming, very engaging, very personable, and then all of a sudden it starts looking like the victim is just was essentially losing it, and i.e. they're being gaslighted.
Is there examples where an intimate partner, violent perpetrator claims that the victim is the person who's actually committing the abuse?
Yeah, oh yes, oh yes.
How common is that?
That's very common. Again, that's part of that is very common in the occurrence of the honeymoon phase and the calm period of the abuse cycle. Very common during that time, where the victim, or they're shifting the blame, or anything along that line. That's very common for that to happen.
And you indicated that you reviewed some audio tapes in this case, correct?
Yes.
And what, if any, evidence did you review there that correlates with Mr. Depp attempting to claim that Amber was the one?
Well, I think that was what was said, that Amber was the abuser.
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't understand the objection.
What record evidence?
Overruled.
Thank you. Please continue.
So that claiming that Amber was the abuser in this particular scenario. And what I will reiterate again is that, one, victims aren't perfect, and two, it is not uncommon in the context of being a victim when you know that person is about to proceed or relapsing to a substance or going to a substance, and anticipating what's going to happen, that you anticipate the next move and start initiating self-defense. But by and large, that's not what's going on here. By and large, Mr. Depp, behavior.
Objection, Your Honor.
Behavior was
There's
consistent.
an objection, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. All right. We can move on to the next one. Is prior victimhood of abuse a risk factor for intimate partner violence?
Yes.
And
So
go ahead.
there is something known as intergenerational theory of violence, which is basically along the line of observation, imitation, reinforcement. So you observe a behavior that occurred in childhood, you imitate it when you see that there's no significant negative consequences, but you do get the positive consequence of maintaining control of a situation, solving the conflict in your way, if you would. So that theory is, interestingly, it applies to not only the victims, not only the perpetrators, but also the victims, because there are many victims who grow up in a house of abuse that are not abused, but they're the victims of abuse.
What are the warning signs of intimate partner violence?
So warning signs would be increasing the tension, escalations of tension. So that's when you start seeing, hey, partners getting angry, okay, starting to break down the communication, starting to engage in verbal, nonverbal threats. Victim concedes due to this tension, and that leads you to the actual acts. So these acts progressively build, and then they occur.
What, if anything, have you seen in intimate partner violence about apologies and promises?
So again, the apology is part and parcel of the honeymoon phase, and promises are part and parcel of the honeymoon phase. And, the victim wants to believe it's going to work. They want to believe their spouse is going to be faithful to this. And as part of the abuse cycle, it ends up, as I should say, in the calming cycle, like I said, the victim tries to get some help to try to resolve this until the tension buildup phase where something bothers them. So again, it could be bothering someone about substance abuse. It can be bothering someone about finance. It can be bothering something about your career. Anything is liable to build up tension when you have this framework of limited self-control and erratic, intense mood shifts.
So what, if any, record evidence did you review that reflected Mr. Depp engaging in these warning signs, including the apologies and the promises?
I think that was almost routine, that after it was all said and done, that he would apologize for letting this monster out, letting this anger out, almost routinely. And there's very well record evidence of that starting as early on in the marriage in therapy from his herd. So that's very common and very much occurred, recognizing what happened. And the other part of this is, again, when you can recognize that when you're sober, even short-lived sobriety, when you can recognize that things are better, things are happening better, life is better, then even that should show you that, hey, there's an issue here. There are issues here that when I don't use can be resolved.
Thank you, Dr. Spiegel. I'm going to now move to the Goldwater Rule. Can you explain the Goldwater Rule, please?
So the Goldwater Rule is when Senator Goldwater was running for presidency, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think it was in the late 60s when he was, early 70s, because I was too young to even follow politics then, so please don't quote me on exactly when it was. But basically what's happening is clinicians, psychiatrists were making these quote-unquote armchair diagnoses from their homes or offices because they saw this person on TV, the way they acted, and were asked to comment about what they think their diagnoses are. And therefore, it was felt that that should not be done by professionals in these public settings.
Does it have any applicability here?
No. it does
Objection.
not.
Why not?
No foundation.
All right.
He was explaining what the Goldwater
You
Rule
want to
was.
approach?
Dr. Spiegel, do you remember the question? Does
I
the
think the
Goldwater Rule have any applicability here to your testimony and your conclusions and opinions?
No, it does not.
And
for
why?
Multiple reasons. One, the basics of expert witness testimony would almost be thrown away if you are not allowed to base things on what you evaluated of an individual, what you've read about an individual. So if I'm not allowed to comment on records or charts or information that I looked at, expert witness testimony can't be done. But more specifically for this case, in the Goldwater Rule, the pure version of it was the armchair diagnosis of watching someone on TV. Just, you don't make a diagnosis. More recently, I think that's even more recent, we've had examples of that. So you don't make diagnoses like that. This is not the case here, because like I said to you at the beginning, I have reviewed a lot of professionals and their evaluations and their treatment course, video deposition, picture deposition, court filings, emails. I mean, I reviewed a whole lot of things that directly describe Mr. Depp and his behavior. So I'm not commenting on a public opinion, and I have absolutely no knowledge of what's in Mr. Depp's history. If I was just doing that, it would be like watching a movie. That's not relevant here.
And in fact, I think you testified earlier you invited Mr. Depp to give an
again,
Objection leading.
Overruled.
So to be fair, for an evaluation, for my own direct evaluation, again, I was offered twice that I can do an evaluation of Mr. Depp directly, and both times Mr. Depp and or his lawyers decided that wasn't going to happen.
Okay. And in fact, the court did not require Mr. Depp to.
No, and the court did not require Mr. Depp to undergo this evaluation.
Okay. Dr. Spiegel, these opinions that you have offered here, do you hold them to within a reasonable degree of medical and psychiatric probability or certainty?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, cross-examination. Thank you, Mr. Dennison.
Sir, I'm Wayne Dennison. We haven't met. But let me ask you, let's start with what you finished with.
I'm sorry, one more time?
Let's start with what you finished with. You understand that the court was twice asked by Ms. Heard's counsel to order a medical exam of Mr. Depp, and those motions were denied.
I think your team told the court you didn't want to have them, and the court ruled on them, right? I don't think the court proactively did it. You kind of had a motion to them, right?
No. When Ms. Heard's lawyers moved for them and asked for them and did not get them. Isn't that right, sir?
If you're saying that's what happened, my understanding was that you all did not want him to undergo one. They petitioned for it. The court said no. Yes, that's what my understanding of it was.
The court said no to ordering Mr. Depp to do the medical exam.
Right, I said the court did not require it, right.
And there was one that was ordered, in fact, right?
There was.
All right.
All right, so the last thing you talked about was the Goldwater rule.
Yes, sir.
Been around for almost 50 years, right?
Yeah, I'm 59. That sounds about right.
Yeah. And it's been around as a result of a presidential election that you referenced.
Yes.
And who has that rule? What organization maintains that rule?
The American Psychiatric Association.
An association you're a member of?
Association that I'm a member of, yes.
Yeah. Aren't you a fellow or something?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, and this is an ethical rule, right?
It is an ethical rule. And yes, it's ethical. They say rules. It's an ethical guideline. Yes, they're guidelines.
Mm-hmm. And you know that over time, the American Psychiatric Association has amended the rule, so it's not just about diagnoses, but it's also about professional opinions.
Could you be more specifically say about professional opinion in regard to what?
Well, let me read this and see if you're familiar with it. It is unethical for a psychiatrist to offer a professional opinion about an individual based on publicly available information without conducting an examination. That's the rule, right?
If you're reading it directly, I will believe you.
Okay. However, a diagnosis is not required for an opinion to be professional. So my question is, it's not just diagnosis that this Goldwater rule applies to, it's professional opinions.
So again, I will reiterate that would come down to essentially nullifying witness testimony, expert witness testimony, without a direct evaluation. And as we know, it didn't happen. But regardless of that, the whole expert witness testimony thing would be basically rendered null and void.
The rule, in fact, contemplates that issue, doesn't it, sir?
Again, I'm just telling you the answer to the question. When you're reading me those statements, I'm telling you the response by the other side, who publishes also, is that if that was the case, there could be no expert witness testimony in the courtroom.
Psychiatrists are ethically prohibited from evaluating individuals without permission or other authorization, such as a court order. That's the rule, right?
Again, if you're reading that, then I have to believe you're not misrepresenting it. And I would come back to, again, then this whole thing on we might as well get rid of all the expert witnesses we've had throughout all of time for court proceedings. Because what you're saying is unless a court orders it, and that's what you just said, or the APA said, then therefore expert witnesses cannot do an evaluation based on an observation of the medical records. Insurance companies cannot do evaluations solely based on the medical record where their doctors rendering professional opinions. So at the end of the day, you are essentially saying that unless someone has directly evaluated it, this whole medical system we have, this whole legal system we have is null and void.
I'm not saying...
No, yes, you are, sir. No, you are.
Well, give me a second, and I'll give you more than a second. What I'm saying and what I am reading to you is a rule by your organization that takes into account that there could be court orders that would permit the exact kind of evaluation that you say I'm eliminating.
And I think we're going in circles because I think I just said that means expert witness testimony would not be allowed, and the branch of forensic psychiatry would be especially hindered. And we know the branch of forensic psychiatry does not prohibit that. So I am a member of the APA. That doesn't necessarily mean every single thing they put in there, everybody has to uncategorically agree with, because clearly that's not the case.
Did you agree in your deposition that the professional opinions you rendered were inconsistent with the Goldwater rule?
Yeah, my first was inconsistent. If we're saying that if the Goldwater rule says, and I very much said that during deposition, that the Goldwater rule was made for presidents and public figures such as that, but regardless of that, because that's what it was made for. It's not made for Hollywood, but I'll even take that Mr. Depp's a public figure. What I'm saying to you is that the Goldwater rules say we cannot do any expert witness testimony in our field. That is exactly what the Goldwater rule is saying based on exactly what you read. And I'm just telling you what you are saying that rule encompasses.
What I'm asking you, sir, is did you comply with the ethical requirements of the APA when rendering the professional opinions that you've rendered today?
It is a requirement of the APA. It is not the requirement of the APA. Secondarily,
so the answer is no?
Secondarily, again, in order to not, we wasted our whole morning because there was an expert witness before me. There's an expert witness everyone brought in. So all I'm saying to you, that means the whole field of medical legal law is corrupt and unethical for engaging in an act that the APA clearly says we should not do. So if you're saying that, then the answer is yes, I'm agreeing with that statement.
You're agreeing that the APA would deem your testimony and your professional opinions rendered unethical?
I am saying you are saying that I'm an expert witness. I am saying as an expert witness and solely as an expert witness, that guideline is permitting that from occurring. I would say then that the whole field of expert witness testimony, again, would be disavowed by what you are quoting in the Goldwater rule. And we know that's not the case, because if it was, we would not be allowed to do it.
And you said the rule was for presidents, right? And
that was initially for presidents,
yes. And the name of the rule came from that. But the rule says it is unethical for a psychiatrist to offer a professional opinion about an individual. That's right, sir. It's not just presidents, it's not public figures, it's individuals.
Funny, it was named after according to your logic, if you don't put something in the title, it's not true. That's what you told me this morning, I believe, at my intimate partner violence. So what I would say to you then, sir, is that if you say this about an individual, again, any court would have to render an expert witness testimony invalid. Any doctor that reviews charts would have to render it invalid. I can go on the list of docs that do not see or interview patients directly, and that's a violation. So basically, you are saying that unless you do a direct clinical evaluation, then all of the field of forensic psychiatry and all of managed care is doing an unethical violation because we are not seeing the presence. We deny patients medications all the time without seeing them. We deny patients treatments, unfortunately, without seeing them. And I'm on the receiving end of that. So the answer to your question, again, unless you are saying to me that all of this is unethical, which is what you are saying. This is how I'm interpreting what you are saying to me. That unless you do the evaluation directly yourself, therefore, it could not be considered ethical. And I'm telling you how that's applicable to not just expert law, but also managed care. It's applicable to multiple branches of medicine. Hospital duration of hospitalization stay, they get evaluated. So tell me where you want me to end this.
Well,
Sir.
why don't we talk about what you just testified to? Because I didn't ask you anything about that. I asked you whether, under this rubric, under this principle of medical ethics, have you acted unethically? Yes or no?
No. As an expert witness, I have not acted unethically. And if you want the jury to believe that expert witnesses are unethical, then I guess that's for them to decide.
Yes or
that's
no,
for them
sir.
to
You
decide.
said no. Let's go to the next question.
Okay.
Right? Psychiatric diagnosis occurs in the context of an evaluation based on thorough history-taking examination and, where applicable, collated or collateral information. You'll agree with that?
I believe I said that earlier, yes.
Yeah. And it's a departure from the methods of the profession to render an opinion without an examination and without conducting an evaluation in accordance with the standards of psychiatric practice, correct?
Well, again, by the way, for the record, intimate partner violence is not a psychiatric diagnosis. I'll start with that. Substance usage by themselves is not a psychiatric diagnosis. If you want to cut to the chase, psychiatric use is not a diagnosis of that. Narcissistic personality traits is not a diagnosis. Ergo, I am basically commenting on the things that were brought to me, which are not diagnosis. But an evaluation, if I was going to treat a patient or anyone here, those are the steps I would take.
We, I think, started with the notion that this rule applies broader than diagnoses. It applies to professional opinions.
I believe you just quoted
professional opinions relative to narcissistic personality traits, haven't you, sir? Relative to Mr. Depp.
Again, I believe you just commented on what it takes to do in a psychiatric evaluation to establish a diagnosis. I'm almost certain that's what you said. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you didn't say that, but I'm sure you did. And therefore, what I'm saying is neither IPV nor substance usage, nor narcissistic personality traits a psychiatric diagnosis. And then under the rubric of expert witness testimony, you are saying I acted unethically on the rubric of expert witness testimony. So if you, sir, would like to proceed that expert witnesses are unethical, based on that, I am not going to sit here and disagree with you and waste everyone's time. I think it's fairly obvious. So thank you. Go ahead. These were your words. I'm just saying them back how they're interpreted.
Okay. Let's start with the easy question then. Maybe we can.
That was pretty easy. Go ahead.
All right,
Yeah.
Doctor, you're going to have to just answer the questions.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Getting into it.
You need to just answer the questions,
Okay.
Dr. Speaker.
You are not rendering any diagnosis whatsoever of Mr. Depp today or ever.
No, I probably would say to you that certainly I would not say narcissistic personalities, or I would say traits. Certainly from what I have read, intimate partner violence is not a diagnosis. So the answer is no for that. Narcissistic personality traits is not a diagnosis. The answer is no. But if you want to tell me that substance use disorder is a psychiatric diagnosis, the answer is yes. And I
But that wasn't an issue, was it? Whether Mr. Depp used substances? I mean, you said you've gone through the record. That wasn't really an issue at this trial. He's said it from day one.
Oh, so you're saying he's already admitted to the diagnosis?
He's already admitted to the use of the substances.
Oh. Well, again, there's a difference between admitting to substance use and substance use disorder.
Let's go back to what you just said about narcissistic personality traits.
Yes.
Narcissistic personality disorder is a DSM-5 diagnosis, correct?
Correct.
Diagnostic personality, and you haven't testified that Mr. Depp has narcissistic personality disorder, have you?
I would certainly, if I didn't, I'm certainly thinking that, but at least I'm going to say he has traits which are characteristics of provisional diagnosis of, it's a provisional diagnosis probably of narcissistic personality disorder. But yeah, I mean, I do believe that.
Well, when you say provisional diagnosis, you know the DSM-5 requires, in order to find that diagnosis, 5 of the 9 factors.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't done that analysis. You've never made that diagnosis. You've just identified certain factors
that are criteria for the diagnosis.
Right. But you need 5 of 9 to get to the diagnosis. You've already told us that you didn't make a diagnosis. You're just identifying traits, correct?
I'm identifying traits that are consistent with the diagnosis, yes.
Right. And did you testify in deposition that the existence of traits as opposed to the disorder doesn't have a correlation with IPV?
If I said traits do not have a correlation with if that's what I said, and I don't remember saying that, but that wouldn't be a correct saying. Narcissism has a correlation with the diagnosis. Yes, that part's true.
All right, how far are we going to back this up? Because there's a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, right?
Yes, sir.
And that one is has some correlation with IPV, right?
Narcissism has correlation with IPV. Again, you're not allowing me to answer. You're splitting hairs. You're splitting hairs between the traits that are consistent with, which all I'm commenting on is behaviors and traits that are consistent with the diagnosis. And Mr. Depp, narcissism absolutely has risk factors associated with IPV.
Let's go back again, and maybe we can focus on the question I ask you, and we can get an answer that's addressed to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Narcissistic personality disorder is a risk factor for IPV, yes or no?
Yes.
And you've previously testified that there is no literature at which you are currently aware that the mere presence of narcissistic traits is a risk factor for IPV.
Am I answering the question?
Yes.
That's incorrect.
You didn't testify to that.
Cluster B traits, which narcissistic personality disorder is part of, is a huge risk factor for intimate partner violence, which cluster B traits include narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, amongst others. So the answer to the question is every resource on intimate partner violence will support that cluster B traits, where narcissistic personality falls under, is a risk factor for intimate partner violence.
Any single trait is a risk factor for IPV.
Again, I will repeat, cluster B traits. I didn't say any trait. I said cluster. No,
let me be more precise then.
Okay.
Any narcissistic trait in and of itself is a risk factor for IPV.
But you are mischaracterizing what I said. What I said, I'm pretty sure I said cluster. If you look at all the intimate partner violence literature, and it would behoove you to do so, you will see that cluster B traits, I didn't say narcissistic per se, cluster B traits, where narcissistic personality disorder is part of, are risk factors for intimate partner violence, part and parcel, uniformly true. And I'm not sure, the thing I don't understand is I'm not sure why we're arguing psychiatry, because I'm telling you what it is.
Dr. Siegel, you just need to answer the questions.
Okay.
So you want to talk about cluster B, so let's do that for a minute. Borderline personality disorder is a risk factor for IPV.
As part of cluster B traits, yes.
Histrionic personality disorder is a risk factor for IPV.
Less so.
But it
Less so. Less so.
It's
I mean,
cluster.
it's a risk factor, but less so, yes.
Yeah.
Less so. Significantly less so.
All right. So which traits under narcissistic, before I move on there, there's only been one diagnosis in court of personality disorders, correct?
I'm not sure who you're referring to. Are you referring to Mr. Depp, Ms. Hurt? I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Do you understand that there was a medical examination done of Ms. Hurt?
Yes, I did.
Do you understand that the testimony was ultimately that Ms. Hurd suffers from 2 personality disorders?
Okay, so I'm just being specific. I just wanted to know if you're talking about Ms. Hurt or Mr. Depp. So that's all I was asking you.
Yes or no to my question?
Which was there's only one diagnosis of, Ms. Hurd was diagnosed with that.
Yeah, and both of the diagnoses are in cluster B, and both of them are risk factors for IPV.
But both those cluster B things are, I'm not allowed to comment on the testing, so therefore, all I can say is that cluster B traits, and I'll tell you what they are, and by the way, I testified this before, which was that, 1, I don't expect perfection from my victims. 2, absolutely there were cluster B traits Ms. Hurd had. Absolutely Ms. Hurd had.
Given that you've testified to it before, let's move on to a new question.
Okay.
All right. You indicated in your opinion today that you thought, well, why don't we move a little differently? Are you a member of the American Medical Association?
No.
Okay, so you don't know what the ethical rule of the American Medical Association is relative to doing clinical diagnoses about individuals you've never talked to.
So you're saying in terms of doing expert witness evaluations under that rubric, right?
I'm just asking you, do you know the AMA's rule?
You're saying the AMA's ruling under the rubric of not doing value with someone you did not see, and I'm questioning, I'm asking, so you are talking about expert witness testimony?
No, I'm talking about, do you know the rule?
I'm not a member of the AMA, so I don't read the rubric.
Okay, move on, you don't know the rule. All right. You rendered an opinion about Mr. Depp's purported cognitive impairment.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you use as a baseline?
A baseline for processing speed?
Yeah, for analyzing Mr. Depp before you watched his deposition.
What do I use a baseline for that?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I guess my baseline would probably be how I've seen him interact in public. How I've seen him interact with others. I've seen him interact in media. I've seen him interact and his process speed is certainly not slow. I've seen him do commercials. His process speed was not slow.
At deposition, didn't you say that what you did was compare Mr. Depp's performance in lots of pirate movies against his deposition testimony here?
What I said was I've seen Mr. Depp do apology ads. I remember he did an apology ad with Bad Dog with no delay in process speed. I've seen him interact with the media regarding to that. I saw no delay in processing speed. All I'm saying
Let me ask you about pirates, though. You compared pirates to the depositions given in this case.
Then I apologize for what I said. Then I misspoke.
You misspoke? You didn't make the comparison?
Right now, just a second ago? Just a second ago, I may have said that I misspoke. I apologize, I misspoke.
Okay. Because you know you can't compare pirates to sworn testimony, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But you can, but as an aside, you can judge someone's processing speed at any time. Like I'm judging yours right now, you're judging mine. We all judge processing speed as a baseline because of what we know about each other. And I would say your processing speed right now is not slow. So, I mean, we're judging processing speed. I'm just saying to you.
Yeah. But no, any of Mr. Depp's other portrayals in movies, did that affect your analysis of processing speed?
Only I've seen him interact on interviews, and that was it.
Right.
When he wasn't in movies.
Right. But Willy Wonka doesn't matter to you? You see him in that movie, Charlie and Chocolate Factory? Did you look at that one when you were comparing his processing speed?
Do I have to answer that question, Your Honor?
You have to answer questions. Yes, sir.
No, you'll be happy to know I didn't see Willy Wonka I didn't see 21 Jump Street when it happened or whatever it was about. No, I did not.
All right. You made a very kind admission, I think, early on in your deposition, that you're not claiming to be a better actor than Mr. Depp. That's correct, isn't it?
100%.
All right. But with respect to acting, you know that actors actually rehearse for their parts and work on the language, diction, timing of their dialogue as part of that rehearsal?
If you say that, I'm not an actor, so I don't know what goes on. I can't tell you. I have no idea what goes on in acting.
Okay. But you don't know enough about acting to know whether actors rehearse?
Sir, I am not an expert in acting. I have no idea what an actor does.
Okay. During your deposition, what were the circumstances under which you decided to call Mr. Depp an idiot?
Under somebody call Mr. Depp an idiot?
Yeah, you called Mr. Depp an idiot in your deposition. Why?
Okay. So I think it was in the context. You probably should read the context of it, because I think the context was, and I'm trying to think back. Okay? And what I thought it was related to was if you're coming to some deposition, okay? And again, I'm thinking back, so you have it in front of you. I don't. So I'm thinking back where he's coming in from Europe for a deposition, video deposition that he gave, and he took an overnight the night before. And what I think I said was that if you're going to do a major thing to a trial that you're involved with, I think you'd be an idiot to come in the night before. All right. So I didn't call Mr. Depp an idiot. I certainly called that planning an idiot. I didn't call him an idiot.
So the words, so I mean he's an idiot, are mistranscribed?
No, I'm sure, again, if I said it in that, if you're just reading one line, one snippet, I'm sure it was in the context I just said. But again, you have it in front of you, I don't.
Yeah. Is idiot a professional opinion?
I wasn't rendering professional opinion,
Yeah.
no.
Is it a psychiatric opinion?
And that follows the Goldwater rule.
How does it follow the...
Well, you just said that I'm not rendering a professional opinion. I just said idiot. That's not a Goldwater.
So idiot is not a professional opinion?
Mm-hmm.
Is it your practice to describe people as idiots?
In my practice, no, I don't describe people my clinical cases as idiots or patients as idiots or victims as idiots. No, sir.
But you sat for a deposition in this case and described the plaintiff as an idiot, correct?
You gave me 9 hours of deposition, and if I said the word idiot, it was an idiot in planning. It wasn't making him an idiot. I don't know Mr. Depp's IQ. I don't know his overall functioning. So therefore, if I said it, it was an idiot in planning, which is what I meant to come across as.
All right. So you did say you don't know his overall functioning, but you made some testimony today as to some evaluations you made relative to his functioning. You would agree with me that it's probably a good idea to think about the questions that are asked you in a court proceeding before answering them.
Am I allowed to answer that question?
Yes.
Okay. So What I meant by function, what I said by function, I believe that his agent reported how late he was showing up to every movie while the cast is waiting for him. I believe that would be an impairment. If I showed up late for that, I would not be here right now, would not have a job. Okay? I believe the thing was in terms of balking out of treatment for substance rehab that his doctor is prescribing for him. So if you're asking me if that's an impairment of functioning, I would say I'm very much substantiated in that.
I'm trying to understand how you got to this notion of cognitive decline. And I thought it was based at least in part on the manner in which he testified.
I'm sorry, what?
On the manner in which he testified.
On the manner, I'm sorry, I'm not being difficult. I can't hear. I'm sorry. On what?
I was asking you about the cognitive decline testimony that you made.
Yes.
And it was my understanding that at least a portion of that testimony that you rendered was that you derived some evidence of cognitive decline from the way Mr. Depp testified.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what I said, yes.
Right. And so all I'm asking you is, don't you think it's a good idea when you're in the middle of a court proceeding to answer questions carefully?
Again, professionally, we diagnose patients with a neurocognitive disorder by gross evaluation all the time with cognitive. On the thought that, again, age normal controls, I'm just saying, age normative controls does not put a 58-year-old gentleman at that processing. That's all I'm saying. That's
Right.
all I said.
And you derived this without ever once talking to the man.
You mean me directly talking to him? Because we know how I derived it. So you're talking about me directly talking to him?
Yeah, you never talked.
I've never talked to him.
Right. And this exam you gave, well, you did talk about Dr. Blaustein, right?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that the entirety of Dr. Blaustein's medical records are 12 pages of handwritten notes.
The important part was what I said. For me, as an example of cognition, which I'm trying to prove, which is what you asked me, the important part was what I said. And that was irrefutable.
The important part is that he gave the mini mental status exam?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's talk about the mini mental status exam. Scored on a 30-point scale, right?
Yes.
All right. And it's an exam that basically is most often used for, Alzheimer's, dementia, those kind of testing?
It's an exam that tests cognition in all psychiatric illnesses, not just Alzheimer's. It was made for dementia, for Alzheimer's, but is the standard, has been the standard for testing cognition in all psychiatric illness, substance use disorders included.
Okay. Now, there is an element of that exam that requires drawing, correct?
Yes.
So you don't know what drawing Mr. Depp did or whether the drawing should have been fully scored.
I wasn't questioning his visual, spatial, perceptual skills, which is what that does.
Right. And you don't know what score Mr. Depp received on the exam.
I was very specific. I know 3 words, not remembering at 5 minutes. That's all I said.
3 words, not remembering 5 minutes, and he remembered one of them, right?
From what I understand, he didn't remember any of them.
All right. Memory on the exam, out of the 30 points, what's it worth? 3. 3, right? Memory is 3 out of the 30.
Yeah, memory's 3.
Okay.
But again, the memory section in and of itself tests memory. That's the only question that tests memory, only section that actually tests memory.
So the memory section tests memory. It's the only section you testified about. And for all you know, that with respect to the exam that you're relying on, Mr. Depp scored 27 out of 30.
And that would be telling, though, cognitive, if you score 27 out of 30 and you miss 3 points on memory. That would be very telling.
You don't know if Mr. Depp had been up all night the night before.
Again, you wouldn't expect to not recall any words at 3 minutes unless there's a cognitive issue.
You don't know if Mr. Depp was high.
And again, now that could affect memory, but I'm not refuting that. I'm not refuting that at all. He could have been high, he could have been drunk, he could have been using cocaine, and that would absolutely affect his memory, which is what I said. Yes, you're right.
So ultimately, you have no idea what state Mr. Depp was in at the time he took the exam that you're relying on.
Short of what you just said about drugs and alcohol, okay, there shouldn't be a reason why a 58-year-old also with strokes and other neurocognitive conditions, but short of that, there shouldn't be a really good reason why someone at that age shouldn't come up with at least one. But an answer.
But wait a minute, you started that question with short of drugs and alcohol, and spent 35 minutes talking about his use of drugs and alcohol. Isn't that right?
Oh, I'm agreeing. I thought I agreed with you. I think I agreed. I said that drugs and alcohol can absolutely affect cognition. I'm not sure. I agree, but I'm not sure if that's a problem. I agree with you on that.
All right. So you don't know one way or the other how he scored on the exam. You don't know whether he was at the time on drugs and alcohol, but you're going to rely on it in your testimony to say that he's cognitively impaired.
Which is what we do in clinical medicine, sir.
Okay. You rely on tests that you don't know when it was administered, you don't know the score of the test, and you don't know the state of the person being tested, but you're going to rely on it anyway.
Again, if we had to know every test, when people get the mini-mental state exam, we have no idea clinically if they are high, wasted, stoned, stroke. We have no idea. So if you're going to say that, that means everybody needs a drug test before they do a mini-mental study, and that's not the standard of care. And I think you know that. So
let's talk a little bit about this word you kept using, correlation. You know the word, right?
yes.
Correlation and causation aren't the same thing, are they, sir?
No, they're not the same thing.
No. How are they different?
Correlation is consistent with causation, means direct link.
Can you say that again? You were so fast I didn't hear it.
I'm sorry about that. Correlation is a risk for something happening. Causation is a direct link.
Right. So just because something's correlated doesn't mean it's going to happen.
100%.
Right.
100%.
Like lung cancer, for instance. Smoking is very highly correlated with lung cancer, right?
Yeah, and there's certainly a link to lung cancer and smoking.
Right. But not all smokers get lung cancer.
Not all smokers do. No one, like I said, no one fits the curve perfectly.
Right. And you've made repeated testimony to all of us. All of us do this. All of us do that. Mm-hmm. Your suggestion about all of us is you're just looking at the world as a sample and not at any particular individual, correct?
What I'm looking at is that I'm not talking about an individual, how they can or cannot be resistant. What I'm saying is invariably, when you use substances, this is going to happen. Now, is there a 0.05% chance that someone who does? Absolutely there is. But is that medical degree of certainty? Absolutely not.
A 0.05% chance of what, sir?
Of eventually developing symptoms. If you're using excessively, eventually you're going to develop symptoms.
All right. But risk factors tell us nothing about any one particular individual, do they, sir?
No. Again, risk factors tell us nothing except that if they have it, they're at a higher likelihood of developing it. That's right. What tells us.
But you did a whole litany of risk factors relative to IPV.
Yes.
Right. And none of those risk factors tell us anything specifically about an individual.
Other than they're at higher risk. Right.
Right. So someone could have every single risk factor for IPV and never commit IPV, right?
It would be, again, if you're going to say a medical degree of probability, the answer is They will. But if you're saying uniformly, the answer is no.
Right. IPV can occur without substance abuse.
Oh, sure.
Someone can abuse substances without ever perpetrating IPV.
Again, absolutely. But again, you are saying different than what I said. I did not say abusing substance. I said substance use disorder. Those are two different things, because there are surely people who use substances that do not engage in any violence, do not become psychotic, nothing at all. So
And that's
absolutely.
equally true of people who have substance abuse disorder. There are certainly people who have substance abuse disorder who don't commit IPV, correct?
They are saying people who have substance use disorders, the majority of them, over 50% do. So over 50% do. So that's medical.
The answer is yes.
As you said, not everyone who smokes gets lung cancer.
So there are significant numbers of people. You said it was over 50. So you'd say 40% of the people who have substance abuse disorder don't commit IPV?
And those are the ones that do not have IPV risk factors, though, right? So we're talking about people
wait a
who
minute.
don't.
Isn't substance abuse disorder and IPV risk factors?
Oh, yeah. These are other people that don't have other risk factors, right?
Right. But again, we're talking about people in general. You don't know anything about any particular individual as to whether anybody's going to commit IPV.
If statistics follow through, all we can say is more than 50%, 70% will. If you combine more risk factors you have, the more likely you're going to develop the illness. If you smoke cigarettes once, that might not correlate to lung cancer. If you smoke it chronically, that might.
Right.
So that's all I'm saying.
We're talking about individuals here. You either have lung cancer or you don't, right?
If you're smoking.
Right.
Right.
You either commit IPV or you didn't.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you either did or you didn't, yes.
Right. So you took some issue with me because I was asking about substance abuse generally, and you wanted me to talk about the disorder. I asked you earlier about narcissistic personality disorder, and you haven't made that diagnosis. You've just talked about the traits, right?
Yes.
And somebody can have these narcissistic personality traits and substance abuse disorder and never commit IPV, right?
So, along that line,
Right.
about 80 to 90% of people who commit IPV have a personality disorder. So the answer is less than about 10% obviously do not.
Right. There are more close links with IPV for borderline personality disorder than narcissistic personality disorder. Correct, sir?
I'm not going to agree with that.
No?
I'm not saying there are more links. I would say to you, there are absolute. If you're asking me if there are links, the answer is absolutely. If you're saying to me more, I can show studies say yes, so studies say no. That has not been absolutely definitively correlated. No.
No.
Absolutely not.
MDMA. What is it?
Ecstasy.
Yeah. And what's the normal dosage of ecstasy for people who use ecstasy?
Again, I couldn't tell you the quote unquote normal dose because honestly speaking, no one knows what they're getting when they're using it, right? It's not regulated, so.
But the effects of ecstasy enhance sense of well-being?
At low doses, the answer is yes. I'm going to gather when you're using it at higher doses and develop tolerance, you develop the sympathomimetic effects, which are not so enhanced well-being.
Increased extroversion, that's a symptom.
Again, At lower dose, you are 100% right. At low amounts, you are 100% right. It is an adaptogen. We feel closer to people. That's what people who use it say. They feel close to people, warm to people, 100%. But with continual use and higher doses, it could be fatal. Right. So that's not well-being. I don't know if I'd call that well-being.
So continued use at higher doses, MDMA can be fatal, correct?
Correct.
What if you took 8 to 10 tablets of MDMA?
What if you took again, you don't know what it's very hard to say that. You don't know what it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Contaminated with. Okay, you can't just say, hey, let me just take 8 to 10 pure ecstasy and see what happens. That's not going to happen. So what I would say to you, again, because substance abuse are unpredictable, they are not regulated, no one knows what they're going to. No one has any idea whether it's going to cause this empathic and tactogen effect at very low doses, or is it going to cause the sympathomimetic, increase, it's like a stimulant, like cocaine, something we talked about like that. No one knows what's going to happen. It's not regulated. And no one knows if you're using with other substances either, like other stimulants.
Or if you mix it with alcohol.
Or mix it with alcohol. No one knows if it's going to be potentially worse.
Right. But this is a potentially lethal combination. 8 to 10 MDMA tablets and alcohol.
This is a potentially toxic combination.
Right.
Can it kill you? Yeah, I mean, it is a potentially toxic combination. That's true.
Ever heard of someone cutting off their own finger on MDMA?
Have I ever heard of it?
Yeah.
No, I can only give you one example.
Hadn't seen that one before. Okay. So, Seroquel. That one puts you to sleep, right?
If you want to phrase a barbiturate putting you to sleep, then the answer is yes.
Yeah, you heard Mr. Depp talking about sometimes being on the nod, right?
And again, I think I explained Seroquel very well this morning.
Good. I'm going to ask him a few more questions.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. You kept making references to street value. Why were you doing that?
Because that's why people with substance use disorder use quetiapine and Seroquel.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
That's why people who use quetiapine or Seroquel it sells on the street because it's so barbiturate-like in effect.
Right, but you said that Mr. Depp had a prescription.
There are many substance use disorder patients who have prescriptions for Adderall and quetiapine from their doctor, and that doesn't mean they're not getting high out of it. That doesn't take much. Doctors like to believe what patients have to say. They're not going to go in there being expert witness testimony. All I'm telling you is that in people who have substance use disorder, it is not uncommon. And the thought was initially that because quetiapine was not addicting, that it's safe to give in people with substance use disorders, when in fact, we absolutely know it has street value. We absolutely know that for a fact.
Right, but my point about this is you made a bunch of testimony about street value, but you knew at the time you made the testimony that Mr. Depp, in fact, had a prescription.
He also had a prescription for oxycodone and roxicodone. Does that count? Because that's also probably not a good thing. Just because you have a prescription doesn't mean that...
Mr. Depp would agree with you it wasn't a good thing.
Just because you have a prescription doesn't mean you can't abuse it.
No, I'm not suggesting you're abusing it. I'm just wondering why your testimony was in any way tied to street value when every single drug you referenced, Mr. Depp had legally.
Again, you can have prescription substance abuse, and we know that, correct? No, I shouldn't be asking that. We can have prescription substance use disorders, and that's not uncommon if you look at the opiate epidemic that we're living in right now. We can have that. That's not an uncommon thing. Unfortunate, but uncommon. Not uncommon.
So, Seroquel, I think you described as a sleeping agent when used off-label?
When I saw what?
Sleeping agent, Seroquel, when used off-label?
When used off-label, it's used. I can be used sleeping agent. Yes.
Right. So, Mr. Depp's use of Seroquel could account for some of the photos we saw in this trial, where he's asleep in a chair.
Again, what I would say to you is that if you have a substance use disorder, You are using it to be knocked out. Yes, I agree. But I'm not sure at the end of the day if she'd have vomitus over you either, because I've never seen Sarah Will do that. So when he was passed out in the chair, he also had vomitus over him. I've never seen Sarah Will do that ever.
Neurontin is another one of the drugs you testified about. That one's also prescribed, right?
Yes, it is.
And what's the prescription for that?
What's it used for? And what's its indication, or what's its used
What's its indication?
I mean, its indication is for seizures. It may have one pain indication. Again, I'm not a neurologist, so I can't tell you exactly if it does. But it's chronically used off-label for pain. It's used off-label for anxiety.
Right. And what's its effect? That's another one that'll put you to sleep, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, sure, 100%.
Right. And you made reference to a picture. There's been testimony around that picture that Mr. Depp fell asleep with ice cream in his hand. That's not vomitous, right?
I was told it was vomitous.
Okay. You talked about the fact that Mr. Depp indicates that from time to time he uses an earpiece.
I read that, yes.
Okay. Did you read the testimony of Mr. Wyatt, who told you what was being pumped into that earpiece?
Yeah. I mean, if I remember right, I think it was lines, right?
No, it was music.
It was music, not his line?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if Mr. Depp was listening to music rather than being fed his lines, does that change your opinion as to his cognitive function?
If he was never fed his lines through the earpiece, which I know he was, but read he was, and that may have been that example, Mr. Wyatt may have said that it was music. I guess the question is, were you having the music during the actual talking of your lines? Is that what you're saying to me?
Well, if you can do two things at once, that's a pretty high cognitive function, isn't it, sir?
It's a very good point, actually. Divided attention is something humans have a lot of trouble in. Yeah. So, for instance, we have trouble driving and putting on using our cell phones and direct. So, divided attention, humans actually are not very good at. I'll put that out there.
But
in general, not just Mr. Depp, in general.
But Mr. Depp is pretty good at acting. You acknowledge that early on.
Absolutely. Well, better than me, so I know that.
Because you don't act. In fact, you don't know about acting.
You're right. I have no idea about acting.
And you don't know how prevalent the use of earpieces are in acting.
Again, I know nothing about acting.
Irrespective of the fact you know nothing about acting, you've testified that Mr. Depp's use of an earpiece is somehow a cognitive deficit?
So if I was giving a lecture and I was fed my lines, I would think there's a cognitive deficit. So and maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Hollywood stars get lines fed to them through earpieces all the time, and I don't know. That could be said. It sounded to me to be unusual if you're doing a movie and you don't know the lines. But like you said, I'm just judging what I do with lectures, and that would never happen.
If you gave lectures, you wouldn't use an earpiece, but you're not going to tell anybody how to act.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I said if you gave lectures, you wouldn't use an earpiece, but you're not telling anybody how to act.
Right, I would not use an earpiece during lectures.
Right.
But I don't know what the standard for standard as Hollywood is for that. I have no idea.
Your testimony about the use of an earpiece, as maybe you were wrong. You're comfortable with the fact that you may have made a mistake there?
No, because I think in the basis of what I've read about it, I'm comfortable that I don't believe that actors are routinely given their entire script through earpieces. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, but not one whit of evidence that this ever happened here.
I guess what I said. I just said I find it hard to believe. I didn't say it. I said I find it hard to believe. That's all I said.
Oh yeah, but what you found hard to believe, sir, was that every line of the script was pumped through an earpiece. Where did you ever get the idea that that occurred?
That's what I have been. That's what I read in the court review, the court evidence. That's where I got it from.
Right. And you know whether Marlon Brando used an earpiece?
Isn't he dead?
Yeah.
So the answer is no. He does not use one now.
Oh no, I used the past tense. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know nothing. I will concede to you. I know nothing about acting. I will concede to you 100%. If that is the standard and people are done that's acting, then I apologize and that was wrong on my part. If that's the standard, I'm wrong. I don't know.
Okay. Let's go with that. No further questions.
All right. How long is your return?
A bit. You may want to take.
All right. Let's go ahead and break for lunch then, ladies and gentlemen. Again, do not do any outside research. Do not discuss your testimony with anybody, okay? All right. So let's come back at 1:55 then. All right. Is that fine? All right. Thank you. 1:55.
All right.
And welcome to a very special For the Record, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, live in Fairfax County, Virginia, outside of the Fairfax County Courthouse, where we are live in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial, day 20. Clearly a lot to break down, but in this hour, we're doing something special for all of our YouTube viewers, all of our Twitch viewers, all of our viewers on social media, and our network viewers. If you have a question about this case, email us, tweet us, pin it on the YouTube channel. We are going to answer your questions right now in real time, me and my very special guest. This is the Johnny Depp case where he is suing Amber Heard for $50 million, claiming she defamed him in a Washington Post op-ed piece. She is countersuing him for $100 million, saying he orchestrated a public smear campaign against her. Amber Heard's side is continuing to present some witnesses. I know there are constant developments in this case, including the fact we learned that Kate Moss, Johnny Depp's ex, will now testify this Wednesday. Pretty big development. So throw in your questions. We're going to answer them in real time. Right now, we'll start with the a little bit with some of the recap of what you might have missed earlier in the day. We heard from psychiatrist Dr. David Spiegel, whose opinion was that Johnny Depp exhibited symptoms of a substance abuse disorder and also signs that he was the perpetrator of intimate partner violence on Amber Heard. Let's take a listen to that testimony real quick.
Dr. Spiegel, could you please just summarize for the jury the conclusions you came to with your opinions, and then we'll take you through the specifics.
So in my opinion, based on my review of the evidence, based on my clinical experience, based on my publishing experience, based on my teaching experience, that Mr. Depp has behaviors that are consistent with both someone who has a substance use disorder as well as consistent behaviors for someone who's a perpetrator of intimate partner violence.
All right, so let's break down some questions. We're already starting right now. I'm joined right now by Anjanette Levy, who was live in that courtroom today and provided us quite the story about a woman picking up her baby and saying in the middle of open court, "Johnny, this is your baby." We found out later it was not his baby, thank goodness. But we're also here with Dina Dahl, who's of course been fantastic with our Q&A sessions. So Anjanette, I will go first to you. This is an interesting question. This is from Kaylee from Ness from Facebook. Kaylee Ness says, can you explain what the time limits mean for each side and how it relates to cross-examination?
It means the clock is ticking. The side for Amber Heard really has fewer than 8 hours left. So that's basically today. And I'm assuming will finish up today. So it means that as far as cross-examination goes, they're going to have to maybe tighten it up if they want to get more in and get more out of their witnesses. So it's really interesting, and they're going to just have to, I think they're going to have to tighten it up. Some of their stuff goes really long, and now they're going to be, after lunch, call Johnny Depp to the stand. We know having Johnny Depp on the stand is not a quick thing. So they're going to have to speed it up, and I don't think that they're going to be able to control Johnny Depp. You may recall Ben Rottenborn was often frustrated with Johnny Depp, and we may see more of that depending on how it goes.
Yeah, he has these kind of long, elaborate pauses and sentences. I also want to apologize. We have with us criminal defense attorney Karen Felicia Nance. Karen, I'm sorry I missed you there. So, you know what? I have an apology to you. I'm going to throw you a question from LOZ97. This is one of our YouTubers. How are they allowed to have witnesses in that haven't witnessed anything and are only giving their opinions based on hearsay? How is that fair, and how is it even allowed? I'm assuming this is in reference to some of the witnesses we've seen today who said that they never observed any kind of violence on their end, or they never observed, any certain thing. They weren't there for the injury to Johnny Depp's hand, but they are giving opinions nonetheless. What's your take on that?
Great question. It's with regard to the experts that testify. So expert witnesses can look at all of the evidence that's presented in the case, written reports, testimony, to give it their opinion based on their expertise, which is why in the beginning of each, when these witnesses are called to the stand, they have to be asked certain questions as to why they're qualified to make their judgments, either in terms of a diagnosis or their opinion as to what's they're specifically called for. So the most recent one, right, is Dr. Spiegel, and that's why he's allowed to ask certain questions or make certain diagnoses. But on cross-examination, he's really being questioned as to whether or not he does have the expertise and the information before him to answer these questions that he's been asked, and making these diagnoses, which obviously Johnny Depp's attorneys are objecting to.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Karen, because over to you now, Dina. We have a question from Finn Willie from YouTube. Have you ever seen a more combative expert witness? I'm assuming he's talking about Dr. Spiegel. Didn't seem to want to answer one single question without arguing.
I was surprised at how argumentative he was. And I think he was so argumentative that it basically didn't even matter what he said on direct. I think some of the things he said on direct could very well have hurt Johnny Depp if the jury had found him credible and wanted to kind of rely on his expert opinion. But his inability to answer any of the questions and to be so argumentative made me, as a viewer, and probably the jury, kind of question, like, why he was so defensive. Like, it just took his whole professional opinion, as he said, really into question. It was an excellent cross, and I think they did a lot of damage on him.
Yeah, it was a little weird when they were asking him, well, didn't Marlon Brando use an earpiece? And he goes, isn't Marlon Brando dead? I mean, that's not the substance of the question here. I mean, he was trying to make the point that a lot of actors had used earpieces before, and Johnny Depp was not kind of this mess that needed it. All right, Anjanette, before we go to another clip, again, we are taking everybody's questions right now on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook. Throw them in there. This is kind of a follow-up to what I just asked you. This is from 8 Chicago Typewriter 8. From YouTube. Does the cross-examination from Johnny's team burn Johnny's clock? We talked about how there was time limits.
Yeah, I think it does. And it's not going to be, it does burn their time up, but he's going to be called after lunch. And so he will be there. They'll be questioning him on direct. So he'll be what's considered an adverse witness. So it did burn their clock up quite a bit.
That's why you have to be strategic in your cross-examination in this case in particular. Again, we're taking more of your questions. I want to actually go back to Dr. David Spiegel, the psychiatrist who testified on behalf of Amber Heard. If you haven't seen some of his testimony, it was quite colorful. Take a look.
Has Mr. Depp suggested, based on your review of the record evidence, that alcohol and drugs actually help him?
Yeah, in review of the evidence, he has suggested that alcohol, Xanax, I'm in the list of medications, do help. Although I will also tell you on review of the evidence that there were at least 2 times I can remember that Mr. Depp was referring to at least short-lived periods of sobriety, and I cannot exactly tell you what that included. That both times he said that he functioned better and that he recognized that alcohol and drugs was at the root of his problems.
Again, this today is really just about dirtying up Johnny Depp and showing that what Amber Heard accused him of, she's having corroborating witnesses. All right, so let me go to you, Karen. Unwired Emmy from YouTube says, if Amber Heard wins, will she have to legally hand over the $7 million? I think that's in reference to maybe what the money she promised to donate to the ACLU and other kinds of charities. I think I'm reading that correct. What do you think about that?
That's a great question because we've heard testimony about that. But that was with regard to their dissolution, their divorce. That was the agreement. The settlement agreement was that Johnny Depp would pay her the $7 million. And so the issue was $3.5 million going to go to Children's Hospital and $3.5 million going to the ACLU. And so even though that's been raised as an issue in this trial, that is not the determinative factor. It has to do with her credibility, I believe, which is why Johnny Depp's attorneys were asking about that. And on cross-examination, Amber makes the distinction between donation and a pledge. And so for her, those two things are the same, but in reality, they're not. She has not donated, and she's not obligated with regard to this trial to donate, even though she had made that promise. It does affect her credibility, but it doesn't have anything to do with whether Johnny succeeds in his claim or Amber succeeds in her claim.
I did read online that I think there was this kind of betting odds, and if she wins, the first thing she's going to do is donate the money to, because obviously from an optics point of view, it would look much better for her to do that. Okay, so Anjanette, I can't have a Q&A session without talking about Kate Moss. Beth Ann Allen from YouTube says, is Kate Moss testifying on behalf of Johnny or on behalf of Amber?
Well, Kate Moss will be testifying on behalf of Johnny Depp. She will be what's called a rebuttal witness for him. And the reason she's being brought in on rebuttal is because Amber Heard opened the door to all of this. You'll recall that when Amber Heard was testifying a couple of weeks ago, she talked about that March 23rd, 2015 incident with Johnny Depp and Whitney Enriquez, Amber's sister, in which they were at the top of the stairs. And she said that was the first time she'd ever landed a blow on Johnny. She hit him because all she could think about was Kate Moss and the stairs. And when that happened, you saw Johnny Depp looking down at the table, smiling. His attorney, Ben Chu, turned around, gave a fist pump to Camille Vasquez, who would be cross-examining Amber Heard, because she opened the door. That Kate Moss wouldn't have been allowed to testify in this case at all had Amber Heard not mentioned her. She opened the door to Kate Moss coming in because she is claiming that she heard some rumor that Johnny Depp threw her down the stairs one time. Kate Moss has said in interviews in the past, and she's still friends with Johnny Depp, that she cried for years after they broke up. She loved him dearly, and she said that Johnny Depp took care of her. So I think we're going to hear that Kate Moss tell people that Johnny Depp didn't throw her down the stairs.
Well, I mean, just adding to that, Dina Dahl, we have a user from Twitch, Tony Scungilli. What can Kate Moss's testimony do to help Johnny Depp's side, or is it more designed to hurt Amber's credibility? I mean, again, it all depends what Kate Moss is actually going to testify to. They believe they're going to use her as a weapon.
Well, we heard an opening statement by Johnny Depp's attorney that, nobody has ever alleged physical abuse against Johnny Depp in, 30 years. And here now, the jury, if Kate Moss does testify and testifies to how we think, we're going to hear somebody who was in a long relationship with him say that he never physically abused her. That helps quite a bit, especially with the testimony we just heard with that expert who really tried to say that because he's a substance abuser, which he's admitted, he's more likely to be a physical abuser. And if you now have a past relationship say, well, he didn't abuse me, it kind of discredits that whole thing that somehow it's tied together, because the expert also said it doesn't have to be a substance abuser hits a physical abuser. Right. So every little bit of past relationships that come in showing Johnny Depp never did that before certainly helps him here.
So many twists and turns in this case. We thought we were going to hear from James Franco and Elon Musk, but they're like, don't worry, we got Kate Moss. She's coming in this week. So clearly there's a lot of things that are fluid that are happening here. We are taking your questions. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, I will just tease, there's one question from TTBA 1878, a fantastic question that we're going to get into. Stick with us. We'll be right back right after this. right, welcome back, everybody. We have a very special lunch break right now in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. As soon as it starts up again right behind me in the Fairfax County Courthouse, we will jump live. But right now in our lunch break, we are taking your questions. If you're on YouTube or Twitch or Twitter or Facebook on our network, send us the questions. We will answer them. You can tweet us. You can pin the questions. We're answering them in real time. So I did tease one question. Karen, I'm going to throw it to you. I said this is a really good one. This is from TTBA 1878. This is a very big picture question. Do you think this case has strengthened or damaged the defamation court process?
Wow, that is a great question. I think that it probably has put a light on it. I don't think that most people in the general public have even focused on defamation. So I think that in a good way that we're now aware, the public is aware that these type of lawsuits exist. So I think in that sense, it's a good thing. The bad part is it's muddied by the whole allegations of domestic violence, because now we have to focus on whether or not, from a criminal perspective, that these things happen. So I think that from two ways. One, yes, we're now aware that there is such a thing as defamation and how hard it is to prove. And on the other hand, we're coming to light the fact that actually men can suffer from domestic or be victims of domestic violence as well, if you believe Johnny Depp's team. So I think that overall it has a good effect in terms of awareness. And then we just need to focus on just their nuances to domestic violence. There's so many different types of physical, emotional, sexual. So I think it definitely raises that conversation for more of us to have these type of discussions, clearly.
Yeah, we talk so much about the celebrity aspect, but the legal case is so important altogether as well, and whatever the verdict ends up being. So again, great questions that we're receiving from all of our viewers. Keep them coming. I want to play some of the testimony from Dr. Richard Moore, this orthopedic surgeon who said the injury he saw to Johnny Depp's hand wasn't consistent with the story that Johnny Depp gave.
And because there's been talk of a glass explosion, Dr. Moore, there's seems to have been a suggestion that somehow glass may have sliced off the end of Mr. Depp's finger. Is that what's going on here?
No, this wound doesn't really appear to be a sharp glass laceration.
You referred earlier to an avulsion, which is a term I had never heard before. Your opinion in this case. Explain to the jury what that is, please.
So often with crush injuries and we'll see tissue loss that we call an avulsion, or where the tissue's actually pinched or pulled away rather than sliced or cut. And it's not uncommon with crush injuries to see that.
So we're going back and answering some of your questions on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. Okay, and Jeanette, this is a good one. Again, I keep hitting you with the time, but people want to know because we never really see it in the criminal cases. This is from Angel Cat Life on YouTube. Cat spelled with a K. I just want everybody to know that. If they run out of time, can the judge really stop them? Don't they have a right to give their best case with all the evidence? Can it be a mistrial if the judge stops them?
I don't think it can be a mistrial because she told them from the very beginning, this is what you have for your time. And it's up to them to use their time wisely and to budget wisely. It says if you get a paycheck, right? You know what your take-home pay is. You know you don't go and blow it on one thing when you need groceries. So I think it's all about budgeting your time and using your time wisely and getting the most bang for your buck. And the judge has told them repeatedly, if you run your time out, if your clock is up, I will stop you mid-witness. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, we could be there. Who knows how long? Because you know what? Here's the thing, Dina. The cross-examination that we've been seeing of Dr. Spiegel's, I mean, it's something to watch. And we have a question here from Twitter from @Calibrowski. Do we think that maybe Dr. Spiegel was put on the stand to fluster Depp's side? I can't seem to find a good reason as to why to put him up there if he never actually gave an evaluation of Johnny.
Well, he was meant to give his expert opinion, which he was right that kind of thing happens a lot in these cases. And I do think that what he said in his direct probably was helpful to Amber Heard. He was trying to make this connection between substance abuse and physical abuse, but he was just so bad on cross-examination that, you know, I think the jury would probably throw out pretty much everything he said there. I also thought, though, about the clock, because the Johnny Depp team really took a lot of time cross-examining him, and I think they only did that because they know how much more time they really have than Amber Heard. They had that leeway because probably after the first few questions, they had pretty much already, I thought, destroyed his direct. They probably could have just finished then.
You know, it was interesting during the cross-examination. There was one point, again, as I said, Dr. Spiegel said, "Isn't Marlon Brando dead?" Johnny Depp actually put his hand and his face in his hands, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe what's happening here." But we have a question for Dina, actually for Karen, from Mal. This is from YouTube. It's on the surgeon that we mentioned, who testified earlier, Dr. Moore. Would the fact that Johnny wrote with his finger in blood after the incident affect the look of the injury and therefore affect Dr. Moore's analysis? Remember, Dr. Moore, as he just said, he doesn't believe that this was caused by a vodka bottle being thrown at Johnny Depp's hand. Now, he couldn't actually say what caused the injury, but he said clearly it's not from a vodka bottle. What do you think about that, though, if he was able to write with his finger?
That's a great question. And so that was alluded to when we saw the mirrors, right? And we saw the black writing, then we see the red writing. And so that's a question that the jurors have to answer. But I'm hopeful that there'll be more information when, for example, when Amber's team calls Johnny back up there, he probably has an explanation as to that. But I think the most powerful thing of the cross-examination of Dr. Moore is that he couldn't definitively say one way or another. Everyone's just speculating. And so all we have really is what Johnny said and what Amber said. So I do think that he was a much better witness than Dr. Spiegel, for example. He said what he had to say and he was done. But I do think that on cross-examination that it gave some questions for the jury to think about. They had to ponder whether this was really how it happened. Was it an accordion door or was it through the throwing of the vodka bottle? So I do think that was it effective for Amber's team? I think it was.
A lot of people have questions about this surgeon, by the way, as the first witness of the day. Dina, we heard from Charlotte C. from YouTube. Why did none of the lawyers ask the surgeon what he thought of Amber Heard's version of Johnny Depp's severed finger? The fact that it was with a phone. Thanks a lot for the great Q&A. Well, you're welcome for the great Q&A. But I guess, that's an interesting point. I mean, because he really couldn't definitively say what happened.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I mean, sometimes lawyers don't ask questions that they don't know the answer to, right? So whether or not, maybe Amber Heard's attorney didn't want him to say that it also, he couldn't say whether or not it was the phone, which would have made his testimony even more vague, right? Like he couldn't back up what Amber Heard said either. And so that's possibly. And then also Johnny Depp's attorneys probably didn't want to ask him that because they didn't want him to say, well, sure, it's possible that it was the phone. So my guess is, it's that they were a little bit uncertain. He was going to probably not be able to say one way or the other it was going to be the phone, which could have actually hurt both of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, did he cut himself? Was a vodka bottle thrown? It's still kind of up in the air. And how much, whatever the jury comes back with on that, it's not one of the core substantive issues. It just lends into Johnny Depp's argument that he was the victim in this relationship and not the abuser. These are great questions. Please keep them coming. We want to keep answering them. We'll play a little bit more of Dr. Richard Moore, this orthopedic surgeon. This is him being cross-examined by Depp's side.
Have you ever seen this picture before, Dr. Moore?
No.
So you're not aware that this is the bar area where Mr. King testified he found Mr. Depp's finger?
No.
Okay. Do you see that broken vodka bottle in the back corner near the bottom of the bar?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see the blood drops on the floor?
Yes.
Can we please pull up Defendant's Exhibit 1820, which is already in evidence? Have you seen this picture before, Dr. Moore?
I have not.
So you're not aware that this is also a picture from the bar area where Mr. King testified he found Mr. Depp's finger?
Correct.
Do you see the bloody tissue on the ground at the bottom of the bar?
Yes.
Do you see the blood drops around that tissue?
Yes.
So you didn't consider any of this evidence in rendering your opinion about how Mr. Depp injured his finger in Australia, did you?
I did not.
That's a good point. That was a good cross-examination point right there, what to really take away from it. Okay, so Ann Jeanette, big picture again. I'm not going to, it's another time question. It's a little different, though. It's a little different. This is from Waleska LeBron on YouTube. How much time will the jury have after Friday? So, again, I think what the question is suggesting is after closing arguments, once they go into deliberations, how long will they have?
Well, I think that that's probably going to be up to the jury. So each side gets 2 hours for their closing. Plus, think about it, Jesse, when we cover these cases, jury instruction, the judge instructs the jury, then then the closings. We're going to have a morning break, likely lunch, then closings from the other side and rebuttal, then probably a break. So it could happen. It could, they could go back and say, you know what, we'll select a 4-person, maybe talk about a few things, and then come back the next week. The judge may leave it up to them as to how late they go, but we don't know that at this point. But everybody I've talked to seems to think that closings will happen. Think about it. Friday is the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. It's a holiday weekend. These jurors have been here for 6 weeks. Do you really think they're going to want to hang out here on a Friday night and into the weekend if they don't have to, and if they can come back the next week? Unless this is going to be like a quick verdict and they're going to go back and say, okay, we've made up our minds, boom, 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 boom. I don't think that's going to happen. Everyone I've spoken to thinks they will deliberate into the next week. And deliberations can go on as long as those jurors see fit.
Could you imagine? They come back, they go, yep, you both lose, we're going home, everybody enjoy Memorial Day weekend. I don't think that's going to happen, but it would have been fun nonetheless.
No.
All right, so before we hit a break, Karen, this is a good one, okay? This is from Hedgehog the Fencer on YouTube. Don't know what Hedgehog the Fencer's profession is, but just let's leave it at Hedgehog the Fencer. That is great to think about. So, hi guys, is it harder for a public figure to win a defamation trial than for a private individual? Karen.
That's a great question. Love the name also. So both, in this particular case, right, both of these individuals, both Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, are public figures. And so there is a certain standard that has to be met. There's a certain amount of leeway that in terms of making a determination as to whether defamation has been proved did it the harm that Johnny Depp is alleging. So we're talking about his case against Amber. Has he proven that? One, obviously, the article, was it about him? I think that even from Amber's perspective, her team's perspective, even though she's denying it, that was clearly about him. So step 2 is, did it cause the harm that he's claiming with regard to his career? So we've heard testimony on both sides. It's the alcohol, it's this, it's that. So I think that from that perspective, it's a harder case to prove from Johnny Depp's perspective. So I think that that's where we are at this point, and we'll see how it goes.
And that's why we've said at the very beginning, despite all of the support you're seeing for Johnny Depp and how he might be even winning in the court of public opinion, winning a legal case for defamation is an entirely different thing and is a very uphill battle. We're going to take a break. We're going to take more of your questions. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back. everybody. Right now, we are having a very special lunch break in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial because we are taking your questions on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, any which way you want to send them to us. Please do. We will answer them online. We'll answer them on air, I should say. And by the way, just great questions about this case and overall the big repercussions of this case as well. I'm back here with Karen Felicia Nance, Dina Dahl, and Jeanette Levy. So, okay, here's a good one. Here's a good one for you, Anjanette. This is from Malfunctioning Zen on Twitch. Malfunctioning Zen, first of all, I hope you're okay. I hope you're okay. But wants to know, why did not any of the doctors from the hospital in Australia testify? Obviously, this is in regards to Johnny Depp's injured finger.
That's a really good question. I think we would have all liked to have heard from them, because what did Johnny Depp tell those doctors? We know that he kind of was saying...
I just realized that you couldn't hear my last kind of break in here, but I'm going to be leaving soon to hang out with my family. It's my aunt and uncle's last day in town. They're coming from Honolulu, Hawaii. So in a bit, I'm going to send you a link to the original video that I'm stealing from, in which you could go continue to cover this case. I thank you all for tuning in. I thank Queenie for the $2 super chat earlier in the stream. And I'm going to be going a little bit longer, but I'm going to post a link there. And just kind of a forewarning, I'm going to be ending soon. I see Brett Boyle in the house, Anonymous in the house. Thank you guys for tuning in. And I'm going to mute myself and let you guys listen in here.
About how they didn't want this out in the press. They didn't want this in the press, that there was this blowout at the house in Australia while he's filming Pirates of the Caribbean and the tip of his finger came off. Can you imagine? It would have been big-time tabloid fodder.
And I will tell you, it's fascinating that his defense was, well, I didn't want to get Amber Heard in trouble. And when she was on the stand and was asked, well, why didn't you say what Johnny Depp really did to you on one incident? She says, because I didn't want to get Johnny Depp in trouble. And so they're literally mirror responses to one another, which is, again, this he said, she said. And sometimes I wonder if the jury's going to maybe put aside some of the testimony and focus more on what we heard, and specifically audio recordings of the couple, which gives us such an inside glimpse into what might have happened. Let's take a listen to one of those between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
The last time that it got crazy between us, I really did think I was going to lose my life, and I thought you would do it on accident. And I told you that. I said, oh my God, I thought the first time.
Amber, I lost a finger, man. Come on. I had a jar of mineral spirits thrown at my nose.
You can please tell people that it was a fair fight and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and yes. It's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
It doesn't matter if it's a fair fight. My
exactly, because you're.
And that's it. I mean, that's going to be it right there. It's going to be important for the jury to really make that determination. It's kind of ironic you said that. So, Dina, I go to you, and I apologize to our YouTube fan here because I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this. Mini PWNAG. I don't know. Mini Padmaja. Let's go with that. This is on expert witnesses. Okay, when experts like doctors describe symptoms of mental illness or injury for the side that they're testifying for, could the opposing counsel ask the expert if they see those symptoms of their own client? What do you think about that?
Sure. I mean, that would go toward, what's the foundation for their professional opinion. And we have heard experts testify, and I think maybe this one might have also that this was consistent with what he has seen in clients before. So that is possible. I think the most important thing about the experts is, they're paid to give their opinion at trial. And I think that they don't hold as much weight at all to, non-paid people. So I think that there is often this battle with the experts, and yes, they could be important, but their opinions are a little bit discounted because they realize, especially here, they brought it out across, they did not personally evaluate whether or not it was the surgeon, or whether or not it was the surgeon didn't actually care for his hand after the injury, and the person, a psychiatric person afterwards, didn't personally evaluate him. So it's kind of taken with a little bit of a discount by the jury, their testimony.
Right. We have someone 777 on YouTube. When does Johnny go back on the stand? I'll answer that one. We believe he is going to take the stand today. Could be wrong. Things could be fluid, but we do believe he is going to be called by Amber Heard's side. Okay, so now I go to you, Karen. This is a great one. This is from a first-time chat viewer. This is from Twitch, and this is from Nikhil Senkar Chaplin. Nikhil Senkar Chaplin. Do you think that this trial has hurt the Me Too movement, as many media outlets are claiming, despite the majority of evidence pointing to Depp being the abuse victim?
That's an awesome question, and I really do agree that it has, to a certain extent, hurt the movement because of Amber's testimony and the fact that she taped Johnny, and we actually heard firsthand how she sounded and how she was reacting to him, and actually sounded like the aggressor in many of these instances. So I believe that if you take it in a vacuum and just look at how she presents in this particular case, I think that it would hurt the movement. It doesn't help it. But if you look at it globally and look at other circumstances and other victims and survivors of domestic abuse, I think that it doesn't hurt it. But this particular case, looking at what Amber's alleging, I don't think that it helps movement at all.
We have a question here, Dina, from Perfect R6 on Twitch. Why is Dr. Spiegel saying that NPD, I think this might be BPD, bipolar, I think you're talking about borderline personality disorder. So why is Dr. Spiegel saying borderline personality disorder and substance abuse is prone to interpartner violence in regards of Johnny Depp, but not for Amber Heard, as she has borderline personality disorder and other personality disorders? Did Dr. Spiegel spend time with Miss Heard? Because he testified he didn't spend any time with Johnny Depp. How is that fair?
You know, I think that actually on cross-examination, it was Johnny Depp's attorney that had him link border personality disorder with this violence, because he had testified that narcissistic personality was tied to violence, and he said that Johnny Depp had traits of it based on not a personal evaluation, but all of the, publicly available information and court information he had seen of him. And so I think as a way of rebutting that, Johnny Depp's attorney said, well, is it also linked with borderline personality disorder? And he said that because of the testimony earlier by Dr. Curry, who had diagnosed Amber Heard after personally evaluating her with the borderline personality disorder, which I think just continued to kind of, like I said, destroy the direct testimony by this expert witness, because now he's admitted that both of them, with their respective diagnosis, could have been perpetrators of domestic violence.
I mean, a lot of our questions today are focused on Dr. Spiegel and how questionable his testimony has been. I'll give you one, Karen. This is from Lauren Johnson Martin from Facebook. Can Depp's team ask to have Dr. Spiegel's testimony be thrown out due to him being a hostile witness?
Well, I mean, obviously the question can be asked of the court. Johnny Depp's attorneys could ask that of the court, and it would be ultimately up to the judge to make that determination. But I do think that it wouldn't necessarily be to their benefit to strike it, because I think that he was such a terrible witness on cross-examination, and he still has a redirect. I don't know if he's going to be able to, quote, rehabilitate himself, but I do think the fact that he's all over the place and he's somewhat combative, I don't think that it rises to the level of being a hostile witness, but clearly he was a difficult witness, and I don't think that he did very well for Amber's side and actually helped Johnny's side, so I would keep his testimony in.
Which is interesting, because this is the last week of the presentation of evidence. This is going to be some of the last things that are fresh in the jury's mind as they begin their deliberations. So let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to answer more of your questions. Throw them in there. We still got another 20 minutes or so we can answer them. And we'll be right back right after this.
Alright, everyone, so I think I'm gonna turn it off here and go eat breakfast and hang out with my family. I got a link pinned in the top if you want to click that and go watch the other stream. Feel free to do that. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate you, and I'll see you all in the next one.